Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are joining us from around the world. Welcome to Innovation 2020. For some of you, this might be the first session that you're joining us for in these 2 days. So just to set the context, all the sessions in Innovation 2020 help to bring officials together from different countries, from different professions, from different departments, to talk about how people are innovating, what some of the challenges and barriers are that they might be facing, and hopefully to come up with some solutions for how we might overcome those obstacles and really drive forward transformation, innovation and change. I'm Siobhan Benita. I was a former UK civil servant. I'm now a government commentator and facilitator for these types of great events, and I'll be helping us through the different panels for the rest of today. Today's panel is focusing on, this panel right now is focusing on the issue of skills and tools. And while innovation requires the right aptitudes, the right attitudes, it also is a learned skill. So civil servants need to have an understanding of how to develop, promote and deliver innovative ideas, plus a good knowledge of some of the key fields like digital technologies and better staff engagement. And tools are equally important, particularly in supporting collaboration and ensuring that good ideas are picked up and adopted. So this session will really consider the recruitment, the training, the promotion, performance management, all of those type of policies that best promote innovation in government. I would like to say I'm going to go through the format in a minute and I'm going to introduce our panel members too. We have a great panel here today. I'm looking forward to the discussions. But also this session will also be as good as you are, the audience who are joining us here today, because you also get an opportunity to submit some of your own questions. And time permitting, we'll be looking at those questions as they come in, and hopefully we'll have time to put those questions to the panel, put at least some of those questions to the panel once we've had the initial panel discussion. So without further ado, let me introduce our fantastic panel for today. We have Fiona Deans, who is Director General of the Government Digital Service in the United Kingdom. And Fiona was actually chair of the workshop yesterday for Digital Data and Technology, Knowledge and Information Management and Statistics professions, looking at these issues. So she can hopefully bring back some of the issues that were discussed in that workshop yesterday. Then we have May Gee, who's Director of Policy and Innovation, Public Sector Transformation in Singapore. And May Gee was also chair of the workshop yesterday, she was chair of the workshop for officials involved in workforce and workplace, and I think maybe one or two from the property side as well. So again, May Gee could not only draw on her own experiences of what's going on in Singapore, but also bring back some of what was discussed in that workshop yesterday as well. And I'm delighted to introduce Hala Audi, who's Director of Strategy, Performance and Assurance, Infrastructure and Projects Authority in the United Kingdom. Hala also chaired a workshop yesterday. He was chair of the workshop for Programme and Project Management Professions. So hopefully can bring some of that in as well. So as you'll start to see, part of Innovation 2020 is to gather different viewpoints from officials and from different professions and different departments. And then we look at bringing those together, how we get that great collaboration. And then last but by no means least, we have Raj Thuppal, who's Chief Technology Officer, Shared Services Canada, and he was chair of the workshop covering recruitment, retention and training for an innovative workforce, which was an interdisciplinary workshop yesterday. So you already had officials with different backgrounds. So I'm going to kick off by asking Fiona, pulling on what you did discuss yesterday, what did you learn about how governments and departments are equipping digital teams with the skills and tools needed to foster an innovative culture? And I'm sure you can draw on your own experience as well. Fiona, over to you.
Thanks, Siobhan. So I think something that came up across all the groups and that we talked about quite a bit was what an enabler COVID-19 has been for people working in government to get the right tools to help with innovation. So with everyone moving to home working in March, a lot of departments moved very quickly to equip their staff with laptops if they didn't have them already, and also with video conferencing technology and online collaboration tools that perhaps they hadn't had before. There's been quite an effort across government to ensure interoperability between departments as well, which has been successful. There's still some work in progress on that, so that people from across government can collaborate together, which is obviously very important for innovation. And it's obviously, with everyone working virtually, it's been a lot easier to kind of have a meeting with lots of different departments rather than everybody having to get to one place in order to have the meeting. So I think that's all worked really well. There were some reflections about some of the skills needed for innovation actually being around problem solving and the way you think. And we were lucky enough to have someone from Google in one of the groups to talk about how they think about that in Google, and that they reference Simon Sinek's 7 Reasons Why as a way to really kind of get under the skin of some of the problems that they're working on as well. And then I was talking a little bit about what GDS does at the centre of government in order to support and foster innovation. So we have a programme called the Gov Tech Catalyst, which we've set up and which encourages encourages government departments to put forward, public sector organisations as well, to put forward knotty problems that they have that they think technology can help solve, and then private sector companies to bid for bid for solutions to those problems, and bid for innovative ways to come up with those solutions, and that's a way to get more innovation into government as well.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Fiona. Maggie, I'm going to ask you a bit similar, I think. What from your discussion yesterday and what you know yourself, what are the main opportunities do you think for innovative practice in people involved in workforce and workplace issues?
Yeah, I'm very glad that Fiona went first, because she covered a number of the themes that also came up in my group discussion yesterday. And I think there was almost sort of unanimous consensus that COVID has been the chief innovation officer this year in many of our organizations. And on a more serious note, really, while we all wish COVID would really go away, it has undoubtedly really provided a burning platform for many organizations and offices to adopt innovative practices. And similar to what Fiona has pointed out, be it in terms of embracing digital tools to work from home or to work in teams, to work in cross-agency teams, or even leveraging digital platforms for service delivery. So we had a participant yesterday who worked at the Digital Transformation Agency in her country, and she shared that she has observed an acceleration in digitalization efforts and also greater acceptance of agile methodology during this period, which has also at the same time compelled sharper prioritization of resources, because everybody is trying to bring forward their digitalization plans. And another participant also shared that skeptics who thought that working from home wouldn't be effective are also being convinced of the benefits, even if there were some downsides to be managed. And having sort of tasted the more flexible and agile way of working, nobody is sort of expecting to simply return to how we used to work pre-COVID. So I think what we discussed at our workshop yesterday is actually pretty similar to the experience in Singapore, where we've actually, been emphasizing, smart nation and digital government for a number of years now. And while there's still a lot of room for improvement and we are really still not where we want to be as yet, we do acknowledge that because of the earlier sort of investments we've made in our digital infrastructure, when the entire public service had to go into our, lockdown measures earlier, more than 75% of our public service workforce actually work from home at the height of our lockdown measures, but we were still able to continue functioning, and there were no disruptions to our public services. So this was, in a way credited to some of the sort of earlier investments we've made in our digital infrastructure. And I think in many areas of our operations now across the Singapore public service, we are also observing that due to COVID, there's now greater appetite in many agencies to also deploy technology on a larger scale and sometimes in an unexpected manner. For example, we are using robot dogs, for safe distancing operations in our national parks. We are deploying drones for our tunnel inspections in our underground train system. We're using drones for building facade maintenance, for crowd control in open spaces. We also deploy more and more robots for cleaning services. And at the same time, we're pressing ahead with going for 100% of all our government services to be delivered digitally. So I think similar to what our colleague from the Digital Transformation Agency from Australia shared yesterday, at this point in time in the Singapore context, many of our agencies are sort of bringing forward their digitalization plans. So one of the things that we realize we have to do at the center of government is really to look across at all these plans and really look at it at a system level. What are some of the common and shared sort of digital infrastructure and shared systems we actually need to put in place to allow our agencies to scale quickly and to also sustain the pace of our digitalization efforts. And I think one of the points that was also discussed yesterday was that because of all the acceleration, the digitalization efforts and sort of embracing of more sort of digital ways of working and all that, one of the things that various, I think, public service are also looking at is to sort of have a more concerted effort in terms of building up our digital and innovation capabilities. In the Singapore context, we are actually consolidating many of our digital training programs into a digital academy that would put in place the sort of infrastructure for us to have more systematic building of digital capabilities across our entire workforce. And I think maybe I'll just end off by saying that I think what we sort of rounded up at our discussion yesterday really was that COVID has actually presented many opportunities, and we don't want to waste a crisis. So the questions that we are really trying to answer is, what are the lessons we've learned, during this crisis, be it in digitalization, in terms of harnessing data, harnessing science and technology? What are the lessons we've learned in terms of enabling more cross-agency work to take place, more agile and flexible work environments? And the question going forward is, how do we lock in these gains, right? So what policies or structures must change in order for us to entrench the gains that we've made during this period so that we remain responsive as a public service to the fast-changing operating environment? And this will be relevant in peacetime, not just during a crisis. And even as we sort of continue to fight the pandemic, it's really also about how do we prepare for the future so that when we eventually we will and we must emerge from the crisis, we will emerge as a stronger and transformed public service. And there are things that must change, but there are also things that must continue, things that are evergreen and things that we need to sustain. So our drive to deliver exceptional public services to our citizens, this will not change, whether or not we are in a pandemic. Our drive to cut rules and reduce compliance burden to remain globally competitive, this is something that we continue to press on. The investments that we're making in cutting-edge technologies and the sandboxes that we're putting in place to catalyze new opportunities for our people, we continue to press on with this. And of course, lastly, I think the investments in skills and human capital, which in our Singapore context, our most precious resource. We don't have much, but we do have a bit of people, so our investments in skills and human capital will continue to be made. So I think I'll just end here.
Thanks, Maggie. That was a really comprehensive look at not only what you discussed in your workshop, but also some great examples, which I might pick up on and go back to other members of the panel on those in a moment as well. So thank you. Hala, I'm going to come to you next. So as I said, you were chairing the workshop for program and project management professionals. So what were the kind of key things that they were talking about and the changes they would like to see, or the things that they are aware are going on already and the things that they are doing at the moment?
Thanks, Siobhan. We had a wide-ranging conversation, but I'll pick two themes that just kept coming back again and again. And I'm really interested in what Maggie was just saying, including on innovation and some of the sort of infrastructure construction innovation that Singapore has managed to built in, and it's this sort of pride and future looking and forward look in our government major project that we really want to see flourish everywhere. And so the two areas that we focused on, unsurprisingly, are skills and tools. So on skills, as a profession, as a group, we recognize that projects often in government often disappoint in the sort of the pace at which they deliver, or they can disappoint because they don't quite deliver all the benefits that were promised at the beginning, or they go over budget. And that's something that we all know, how all governments have lived through. And there's something about not accepting that it's like a curse, that this has to be the way it is, because somehow government projects are so complex and so big that there's no avoiding that. And so we talked a lot about how actually let's not start from that position of defeat almost. Let's start from a very ambitious position, which we are taking in the IPA, to say, you know, it's okay that some things that are really difficult, you know, they won't always deliver perfectly, but let's make sure that at least, I don't know, 80% is actually delivering to cost, to time, and the benefits that we promised. So people are incredibly important for that, as are tools. So on people and skills, there's the usual fixes, right? We need to train people, and we're investing massively in the UK in having a professionalized group of practitioners in government who are here to deliver a major project. So we partner with leading universities in the country. We have master level classes. We also have sort of lower level of experiences programs to really teach our people. And we think that's a high value, bang for your buck way of investing in your people. Then there's also the question of pay, and, you know, should the public sector align to the private sector? What's the right pay package? Should you consider the fact that, you know, that there's attractive reasons to work in the public sector that go beyond pay? But then we also went a bit beyond these usual aspects of improving your skills and upskilling. And there's three things that I'd like to highlight from yesterday. One is the notion that sometimes it's cleverer and quicker to get somebody from another discipline and get them to come and help you. So take infrastructure. Do we really need to change everybody in government who procures construction, who has done it for years and years in a way that is seen as traditional and not modern? Do we need to bring them all up to speed? Or should we cross-fertilize them and just use some lateral skills from people who have actually delivered incredible innovation in the digital space or in manufacturing, and just bring them onto our infrastructure and construction projects, because that's a quicker way to assemble a team that's going to be the winning team that will pull the innovation. So that was one question that was interesting. The other two things that I'd like to mention that I believe in, and I think can be done in the spirit of what Maggie said around, you know, not letting a crisis go to waste. So if we want to get the best people in government to deliver the best government projects, I think there's something about the prestige of the career. And we can have an impact on that. There's a way of talking about project management in government that's really proud and ambitious, and is sort of held by the most senior people in the civil service, by ministers. There's a way of talking about it as being, you know, the center of what we do, the heart of what we do, is to deliver these outcomes for citizens. And I think there's something very powerful in the way we communicate that when we recruit, in the way we communicate that to young people. And I'm not sure, without being overly negative, I'm not sure it is the spirit in which we've portrayed working in the civil service before. It was more seen as, you know, the temple for high intellect and the ability to write really complex reports. That, to me, that has been emphasized more than engineering skills, project delivery skills, etc., etc. So I think there's something we can do that doesn't have to cost a lot of money around increasing the prestige of our people to attract the best ones. And then the second thing that's really tough. But as most tough things in life, it has two sides to the coin. So right now, the labor market is going through some really difficult times. To me, there's something about government making sure they use this time to recruit and train the best people that we can, because there's never going to be, there's never been such a good labor market for us and for our projects. And this will train the great people of the future who can then work everywhere in the economy once the economy picks up again. The other area that we talked about was around tools, Siobhan, and this was, so I'll say it very briefly and then we can pick up again. I'm happy to come back to it. But basically, as a group, we realized we all face the same problems. Big legacy IT projects that need reprocurement but are really complicated because the legacy issues are everywhere. High value construction projects that go wrong. The stuff that we face is very similar, and yet, even though we in our own countries have gone through the issue several times, if you look at the past 2 or 3 decades or more, and even though we in different countries go through the same things, there isn't this database that is not super time. There isn't the ease of access to the data and the learning that we would want to see. And how is it that it's 2020 and we don't have quick digital access to some of this data, some of these lessons? And so we started exploring some ways to overcome that. But as I said, I won't go into detail. Back to you.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you. Some really good things we can pick up on there already in terms of kind of data sharing, collaboration, and we'll pick up on all of that in a discussion in a moment. Raj, I'm coming to you. You were in this interdisciplinary workshop yesterday, so you had officials with different kind of professional backgrounds as well. So did they have, hearing what you've already heard from the different panel members, did the people who you were with yesterday and also from your own experience, did they have other views on kind of the skills and tools that are needed to really help foster innovation and also some of the good things that are already going on?
Thanks, Amanda. Definitely, we touched on many of the aspects that the other panelists talked about. Maybe in the interest of time, I can focus on areas that that we actually narrowed down on in our workshop.
Yeah.
It was primarily based on the talent acquisition and retention. So we focused on how do we bring people who are the precious resource, like Maggie mentioned, and how do we bring the right people into the jobs, and how do we retain them? And some of the ideas that that flowed in was with respect to one big challenge is the amount of time it takes to hire a person within the government. So the frameworks that we have and the changes that are required in those frameworks, so that we can be more faster in bringing people on board into government. So that there were some members who had experience in that. So we talked about that. The second area within that was in establishing the relationship with universities to bring in co-op opportunities, and then that leads to bringing the right people in at a very early age, and then train them. So one other idea was in having developmental programs. So bring people at a very junior level, but then put them in a program for over 2 to 3 years, rotating them into multiple jobs, so that they can be trained to the right type of jobs, and leveraging their own skill sets that they bring to the table. So those were some of the experiences from the people that they shared in how do we create an innovative workforce. A few other thoughts were with respect to speed up the hiring process and also to find the right talent. So instead of us posting and then getting people to apply, to go to trade fairs, to go to job fairs and establishing booths, establishing on the spot job interviews and offers that are conditional, of course, based on the reference checks and the security clearance and other things. But at least there is a different way to actually go and seek out a talent that's out there to bring into the system. So overall, the challenges were then shifted to the discussion on how do we retain these people once we train them, once we keep them, give them the tools that they need to do the jobs. Then we talked about the compensation, the private versus public sector compensation. How do we make sure that we have some kind of a retention bonus. And then again, these are very difficult within government context, but there was some discussion on that. And also more like what Hala was mentioning, the pride in working for government and delivering on programs, along with some kind of a career management. So if we do have some kind of a talent and career management for people, that tends to facilitate them to staying more in a particular job. Some challenges we talked about are the policy impediments, the changes to the policy required, the communication with the unions, and if we are giving these opportunities to the new recruits, what happens to all the people that are already there? How do we make sure that it is inclusive of people that are there, and ensuring that any new systems we put in place is applicable to everyone, not just the new talent that comes in. So then we talked about definitely COVID and the impact of the remote work, and actually it has been very positive for many, given we are not localized with the talent search. People can work from anywhere in the country, and that actually opened up a number of opportunities for people to bring the right set of people to the jobs. So I think again, locking in that lessons learned, and how do we take it to the next steps after that. And those were the kinds of discussions that we had.
Fantastic, thank you. That's a brilliant starter, because we had lots of different kind of perspectives there from all the different professions, but actually some key themes, kind of common themes emerging. And I'm going to come back to Fiona, because I'm conscious, Fiona, you didn't have quite as long at the beginning to give your thoughts, but I think some of those things actually are directly relevant for you in your role, and also for the people who are in your workshop. So I want to ask, the next kind of thing we talk about is what people consider to be the main barriers, the obstacles, the kind of things that got in the way of doing some of these amazing things. And a lot of them were touched on there. So, you know, we talk about, Hala was talking about the need for better collaboration across disciplines, bringing in people from different professions to help each other. The idea of moving all our services, Maggie was talking about moving all services onto digital platforms with a kind of a target of 100% all public services going digital. And then I think a couple of things there around staff and raising the kind of prestige and the reputation of being a civil servant. So Fiona, I want to come to you to say, were those obstacles also things that were raised in your workshop? Those kind of things that we need to get better at? But also in particular, I'm interested in your thoughts on this idea of, if all public services are to be made digital, how do we ensure, so one, that's a good thing, but how do we ensure that all members of the public are still able to access those public services, that we don't leave people behind as we do that kind of transition?
Yeah, so I think taking that question first, I think all public services being made available digitally is not the same as all public services only being made available digitally. So I think it's really important to make that distinction. And, you know, at GDS, one of the things that we've really championed across government is the idea of users first. So it would be very much understanding, what do your users need? What are their tools for accessing different services? And therefore, what is the service that you need to develop for them? Now, obviously, in this day and age, digital is going to be the most convenient way for the majority of people to access services. So we at GDS would be advocating that everything would be at least available digitally, but there are groups of people that can't necessarily access it in a particular way. It's about thinking about, actually, would they have someone helping them access the service digitally on their behalf, and also sort of teaming up with other areas of government to ensure that people do have access to digital connectivity and digital tools to enable most people, you know, the vast majority of people be able to access things digitally. So I think that would be my answer on that. And then just reflecting a bit on what Hala was saying and others about the prestige of working for government. So I think definitely you need to kind of raise the way, I think I've heard it described as kind of almost like blue collar versus white collar workers, where the white collar workers are the policy people and the blue collar workers are the delivery and the digital people, which is an interesting way of describing it. So part of it is about raising prestige, but also it's about explaining to digital professionals what amazing problems you get to come and solve in government, and that you get to solve problems on a on a whole population scale, that you will have user numbers very, very high, beyond many sort of private sector companies' wildest dreams. So there are lots of really, really fascinating, knotty problems to come and solve in government, and also obviously you get to help people in a way that you just wouldn't in other organizations. So that's something that we definitely look to promote when we're trying to bring in skills. In terms of barriers to innovation in government, I mean, there are quite a few. One of them that we were talking about yesterday that came up from a couple of different departments was the users within departments. So, you might have a very motivated central team who really embraces digital and embraces new ways of doing things. But actually, you're going to have to get your product used and adopted by people who are providing frontline services. There might be prison officers, for example, or there might be working in a hospital. So doing lots of different things where they have got very used to the way that something works. They're very comfortable for it, and they are not going to embrace the change in the same way across the organization. So it was like very much thinking about how to approach that. And I was commenting that I come from the cinema industry and rolling out technology in cinemas, and we had a very, very similar thing where we were trying to persuade projectionists to adopt digital technology, and part of the thinking that we had to do around the innovation was how we were going to get this to work for users, as well as just all the amazing things that you were going to deliver at the end of it. So I think that was something that we thought was a barrier that really needed to be addressed. Some of the other things that we were talking about was just the risk appetite in government, and the fact that, especially with COVID-19, actually, people took a lot more risks, and that was one of because they had to, and that was one of the ways that innovation has happened, and the speed of delivery and development really, really speeded up. But now we're getting to the stage where the NAO is looking at what happened. It's coming before Public Accounts Committee, which is absolutely right and proper, but it's all got to be justified. I think the thought of when you're about to take a risk of how are you going to explain it later if it doesn't work out is something that is a barrier. And I think government needs to understand how to take risks, because in actual fact, we take very big risks. We spend very large amounts of money on programs. And as Hala was saying earlier, we don't always get it right. So again, one of the things that we would bring from digital is the idea of being agile, of failing fast, working in small chunks of work. But government has to become more comfortable with failures and just accept them and move on, rather than constantly try and get in a cycle where you're trying to fix it, so it doesn't look like a failure, which I think is when things often end up in trouble.
Thank you. I'm really conscious that we're having such a good discussion that time is going quite fast. I can't see any questions coming in yet from people, so please do send any in if you've got them. But what I want to do then is to kind of change the question slightly now to the rest of the panel members there. So we've identified some of those obstacles. Fiona's just given a few more there. And what I was interested in your opening remarks, a lot of you talked about how the pandemic and COVID had kind of forced innovation, forced collaboration in a way that we hadn't seen before. So I'm going to change the question slightly. I'm going to come to Maggie first and say, actually, when it comes then to enablers, to overcoming these obstacles, what can we do? What do people say in your workshops? But also, what can we learn from this current period that we're in now that will help us to overcome some of those barriers? And you've probably got 2 or 3 minutes each. So
maybe I'll just share 3 quick points that were discussed at my workshop. The first really is on leadership and leader management to be on board as champions of innovations. And I think we've often heard that leaders can either hinder or help create the kind of culture depending on the behaviors that they choose to adopt. And leaders, it's important for them to set the tone, walk the talk, encourage their workforce to take some risks and even think out the box. But what my workshop participants were kind of sharing is that to be effective champions is to really go beyond catalyzing change and giving some top-down direction. But leaders should also walk the ground and be embedded in the change process so that they can better appreciate the challenges to unlock innovations and to help bring the process along. So the first point that the participants really talked about was really on leadership and leader management being champions. The second point is sort of also linked to the first, is that leaders need to create the psychological safety for people to innovate. And I think that's a point that Fiona also touched on. There needs to be openness in communicating the sort of expectations, the autonomy and risk appetite that goes with experimentation. And people need to know that it's okay to try and to try again if things don't work out. But as we all know, it's really easier said than done. And even in my context in Singapore, it's very hard for people to sort of celebrate failure or talk very openly about failure. More often than not, we are sharing success stories, right? Hence, a related point that some of the other participants made is that actually in this period, what we've observed is that agile methodologies have become a lot more accepted and understood. And we should really seize this momentum because it creates the sort of structure or the process that allows short sprints of failure, in terms of undertaking certain experiments. And the third aspect, in terms of enabler, and it also relates, to the point about the prestige of the job, really is that what actually are the core values that the organization needs to project to really reflect the kind of organization you are, the kind of culture you want to build, one that's centered on innovation, is centered on excellence, is centered on exceeding, the expectations of the people that we are serving. And the participants also talk about alignment in terms of the values and mission clarity as a sort of foundation for innovative work to really take place. Yeah. So I think I'll just stop there for these 2 points.
Thank you, Maggie. That's brilliant. Let's go to Hala.
Thank you. Sorry, I was unmuting a common habit of 2020.
we're all used to that now. We're all used to that.
So I think on sort of this unlocking the innovation point, I think I'd pick up 2 things that are very different. So first, and that matters within government, and then if we can do it within government, then we can unlock it internationally. But I think there's something about leaders and really senior managers taking the time to make space for learning and innovation and investing in the systems that will give us this ability to benchmark, use reference classes, compare ourselves with other projects, whether over time or across sectors or across countries. And my experience of working in government is the pressure is so high to make the announcement for the next thing that the government is going to do and rush to make the case for investing in that next thing. And then maybe there's some, hopefully there's some resources left to investing in delivering that thing. By the time you've done that, you've changed government often, the attention is somewhere else, and nobody's looking backward at whether we have done the thing that we did announce, we did deliver the benefits that we did talk about. And you don't need, you're not talking mega billions, you just need a few teams that are given the space to actually look back and do some learning, some proper monitoring and evaluation. And I'm sure, maybe some countries are better than others. Maybe mine, the UK, is really not doing well. I don't think so. I think it's, the pressure is so high to just work on the forward stuff that there's never enough time to look back. So I think protecting some budgets as senior leaders and some place for our people to actually do set up those comparatives in a way that is digitally, skilled and make use of latest data. I really think we can unlock a lot, in particular in major projects. And we definitely are setting up major project benchmarking hub at the moment, and we're really upping our games in terms of monitoring and evaluation of past projects so that we can do that learning. So that's one. Then the other thing is risk. It's incredibly important, and it's really hard in government because of the pressure, the public pressure. But there's something really precious that I want us to hold on to around a portfolio view. So, we in the IPA oversee the largest major projects in UK government. We try to take a portfolio view. We have so much more to do in that sense. And it's almost like each of our ministries could take more of a portfolio view so that it lets you point to where, bits of your portfolio are actually repeat jobs, relatively low to maximum medium risk. And then you show the public that you are delivering on that bit of your portfolio the same way that an investment portfolio would work, where you would look to your banker to have some safe investments. And if we can manage to do that more clearly and communicate it publicly, then I think we can give ourselves license to take more risks in other things and explain that, this is a trial, this is a pilot, or this is just a really big thing that we're going to go for it. It might not work, but it's a managed risk, if you want.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Raj, I'm going to come
thank you,
to
Siobhan.
you.
I think for me, I see three threads here that leads to fostering the innovation and removing the barriers, and which we have done as part of COVID. The one is increased collaboration between the key stakeholders. And then the second one is more agile governance. For example, in during COVID time, when we had to roll out systems to all of government, we internally met as a senior management twice a day, and similarly with our external key stakeholders twice a day. So this enabled us to manage the risks properly, which is my third element, which is the risk management. So with the increased collaboration, agile governance, and risk management, we were able to overcome the barriers and able to innovate very quickly to provide the services that we had to provide. Maybe I'll stop at that. I think it's a repeat of many of the things that others have mentioned. So we can go to the next panelist.
Fantastic. I was just wondering, we've got a couple of minutes left, just very quickly, and you don't all have to answer this. I'm just curious whether it came up. Seeing as this was the workshop on skills and tools in particular, if the issue of diversity came up at all. So we've talked about retaining the best people. We talked about recruiting the best people. Did the issue of increasing and improving the diversity of the workforce come up in the context of innovation? If anybody would like to answer that, put your hand up and I will come to you, or your own thoughts on the importance of improving diversity when it comes to innovation. Fiona, I'm going to come to you.
Is it Fiona or Hala?
Fiona, sorry, but we've only got about 1 minute each, I'm afraid, or 1 minute for each comment.
Yeah, so
Fiona,
It sort of came up, actually. It came up because we were talking about where we could learn about innovation from, and people were talking about getting teenagers involved. So it was kind of innovation of age, diversity of age group, and getting a different perspective. And then, obviously it's a very, very important aspect, ensuring that you have diversity of thought in order to come up with different ideas.
Yeah. Thanks, Fiona. Hala, we've got time for you to say what you want to say.
I think huge focus and huge importance on getting a diverse workforce, and we're working on that on the project delivery profession in the UK. Lots more to do. I wanted to relay something that came up yesterday around how much the new way of doing things online during COVID has, I think, brought a lot of democratization to the collaboration that we can have. And I originally, I come from a country, Lebanon, where, you know, if you don't have another passport, it's really hard to get visas. And when working on global health before, I remember how in, you know, the important meetings were always in Berlin or Geneva. And the people you were really talking about were in countries where it was hard to get a visa to travel, and it was hard to get the budget. And so you ended up having the same people meeting all the time between themselves and no diversity at all. And I'm hopeful that the move to digital, thanks to COVID, will democratize a bit the you know, who participates in the debate.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hala. I want to say a huge thank you to all our panelists there for a fantastic discussion. I think in summary, what I would say in terms of the overcoming those barriers, we talked about the importance of leadership. So Maggie talked about leadership. All of you touched on the importance of taking managed risks and a different approach to how we look at risk in the civil service, whether that's about how we communicate risk or about learning to celebrate failure better than we currently do. A clear focus on our values, being able to communicate those, which ties into, I think, what all of you said about how do we make sure that there's a real pride in being a civil servant. That no matter what part you play in the civil service, no matter what professional department you're in, you're all part of that bigger machine. And then I really like the focus on investing in innovation, making sure we had the resources, the time and the space to invest in innovation. And finally, just the thing that we've been trying to crack for years, which is the need for better collaboration across departments, across professions, but also across countries so that we can all learn from each other and become more agile. Thank you so much. That was the brilliant first panel of the day. Thank you to all of you, and I hope to see you in some of the other panels later on today. Thank you so much, everyone.